My parents made me take a pill so I could make room for my sister. They sent me to the bed of Jared Brown, the youngest son of the Brown family. Jared was known all over the city as a wild playboy, someone who didn't care much about anything or anyone. My sister, on the other hand, had always dreamed of marrying Devin Brown, the eldest son, who was supposed to take over the family business. But Devin shocked everyone by becoming a monk, and Jared ended up running the company instead. He gave my sister all the attention and love she wanted. But things didn't go as she hoped. She was kicked out of the Brown family and became the joke of the city. Desperate, she tried to drag me down with her, but we both got a second chance when our parents decided to drug me. This time, I didn't hesitate. I took the pill my parents had prepared. I knew I had no choice but to marry the cold, ruthless man they wanted me to. The tension in the living room was thick. I struggled, fighting back tears, but my father slapped me hard across the face, leaving it swollen. If it weren't for the marriage contract that tied our families, we could never have even dreamed of being part of the Brown family. The contract said that a Brown son had to marry a Green daughter, and if I ended up in Jared Brown's bed, it meant I could marry Devin Brown by right. My father called the maid over, pinching my chin to force me to take the pill. I bit down hard, refusing to open my mouth. But my sister, Amelia, acted fast. She grabbed the pill and swallowed it before anyone could stop her. My mother freaked out, hugging Amelia tightly, crying. What should we do now? My father, so panicked, forgot to call a doctor and rushed out of the house in search of help. Despite all the chaos, Amelia stayed calm. She looked at my father and said, "I want to marry Jared Brown." My father was furious, ready to strike her, but he stopped himself. He just placed his hand gently on her shoulder and said, "How can you be so foolish? Jared Brown is just an uneducated playboy. Devin Brown is the future leader of the Brown family." But Amelia shook her head firmly and said, "Dad, Jared Brown is going to be the head of the family." She gave me a determined smile, and I realized she was ready. She had come back stronger, and I hoped she would survive the same painful struggles I had in our past life. My sister, dressed provocatively, got into the car my dad had arranged for her. I didn't want to stay in the living room listening to their arguing, so I went to my room to rest. I drifted off to sleep and started dreaming about our past life again. After Amelia was kicked out of the Brown family, she lived in poverty. My parents didn't even dare to help her, and she tried to contact rich people who might support her. But no one could stand up to Jared. In the end, she had nowhere to turn. One day, she messaged me saying she had learned a secret about the Brown family, and that I was no longer useful to her. She told me to take care of myself. I didn't want to leave her, but I was desperate to escape Jared. I couldn't let any opportunity slip away, no matter how small. In my dream, I saw Amelia with her hair lifeless, no longer the beautiful, admired woman she once was. I, on the other hand, was the proud wife of Jared, shining in the wealth of the Brown family. But when Amelia saw me, she snapped. She lunged at me, knocking me to the ground. She pulled out a knife and stabbed me in the stomach, blood pouring out as I collapsed. I could only think, why? Why did Mom and Dad let this happen? They did everything for me. But in the end, all the wealth they worked so hard for became yours. She stared at the expensive Hermes bag in her hands, her eyes full of anger. How do you deserve this kind of life? It should have been mine. All of it. You took everything from me. Amelia grabbed a dagger and slashed my face in a wild rage. I closed my eyes, accepting that maybe this could finally be an escape from the misery I had endured. Amelia seemed pleased by my suffering and laughed maniacally as she dragged me toward the cliff. "You should never have come back alive, ID Green," she shouted. "Let's go to hell together." My blood left a trail on the ground as I felt dizzy and lightheaded from the loss of blood. Just as I was about to slip into darkness, I thought I heard Jared and Diabla's desperate cries. "I'm finally free from you," I heard in my fading consciousness. "We will never meet again, for as long as we live." The next day, Amelia climbed into Jared's bed, looking fresh and radiant, ignoring the pain our parents were feeling. At breakfast, she shyly told everyone how kind and gentle Jared had been. She even hugged Mom, but her eyes were on me as she smiled and said, "Once I marry Jared and become the Brown family's madam, I'll make sure you both live in luxury." Our parents' hearts were breaking, but they smiled and nodded, saying, "Our Amelia deserves the best." I watched, feeling cold inside. They were sending their beloved daughter, who they had cared for so much, to the bed of a notorious playboy. How could they bear this? "Mom, Dad, this is just the beginning," I thought to myself, keeping my head down as I ate quietly, thinking about what was to come. At that moment, the butler came rushing in. "Mr. and Mrs. Green, the Brown family is here to propose to you." My parents rushed to greet them, shocked to see two people standing at the door, holding marriage contracts. "Who are you?" my dad asked cautiously. Amelia walked right past him, approaching the two people with an arrogant smile. "You're here for me, right? Give me the marriage contract. I've made up my mind." But the two people ignored her and, instead, turned respectfully to me. "Miss ID, both Jared and Devin Brown wish to marry you. We're here to give you their marriage contracts. Once the Brown family decides, we will handle everything." The room went silent. Then, Amelia's scream of frustration echoed as she broke down, crying, "Mom, Dad, why is this happening? I deserve this. Why her?" She called Jared over and over, but he didn't answer. She texted him, but there was no reply. In her desperation, she clung to Mom, cursing Jared for betraying her. I felt a strange satisfaction watching her fall apart. I had no plans to choose Jared, but I wasn't going to tell him that. I watched as Amelia slowly lost everything she thought she had. The day of decision finally arrived. Mom, Dad, and Amelia watched me as I signed my name on Devin's marriage contract. Amelia clutched Jared's contract as if it were her last hope for wealth. The Brown family arrived shortly after, and within half an hour, Jared stormed into our home, kicking the door open. Mom and Dad huddled in a corner, too afraid to move. Amelia greeted Jared with a flirtatious smile, but before she could say anything, Jared slapped her to the ground. "Mr. Jared," Amelia cried, still lying on the floor, her eyes full of affection for him. But Jared didn't care. He slapped her again, over and over, until her face was red and swollen. There are hundreds, maybe thousands of women who want to get into my bed. What makes you think just because I slept with you, I owe you marriage? He sneered, leaving Amelia lying there in shock. I was frozen, too stunned to even cry. This was nothing like I had imagined. Amelia, you never expected this, did you? This was the man you'd always dreamed of marrying, the life you had longed for. Jared didn't even acknowledge Amelia. He walked right past her, slowly making his way toward me. The fear from my past life gripped me, making me tremble uncontrollably. I couldn't take my eyes off him as he came closer, step by step. When he stopped right in front of me, I froze. "You didn't really choose me," he said. I forced myself to keep calm and replied, "Mr. Jared, marriage is based on mutual consent." Jared's lips twisted into a smirk as he leaned down, his eyes never leaving mine. Without thinking, I took a step back, but I lost my balance and stumbled into a chair. Cold sweat drenched my back. Just as I thought I couldn't take it anymore, a cold voice broke through. It was Heidi Green. It was Devin Brown. No doubt, At this point, Devon was my only hope. He stepped in front of me, protecting me from Jared. Devon took me to a hotel, giving me my freedom, and he visited me from time to time. I heard Jared was throwing tantrums back home, but Mr. Brown insisted that the marriage be based on the name on the certificate. Even though the Green family elders had passed away, Mr. Brown's favor still stood. So whichever Green girl was chosen, that was the one. The wedding was a big deal, shaking up the entire city. The two Brown brothers married the two Green sisters. Some were happy, others were not. On our wedding night, Devon sat silently on the couch, playing with a rosary in his hands. I stayed curled up in a corner, far away from him. My impression of Devon was still shaped by my past life. He was cold, spoke little, and handled the Brown family's business with quick decisions. Occasionally, I would see him smile. But as the family's struggle for control between him and Jared grew, Devon became quieter and quieter. No one expected it, but just when Devon was about to take full control of the Brown family, he suddenly announced he was resigning from all positions and retiring to a monastery. Jared was triumphant, and Amelia was crushed. At the wedding, I smiled all day, but by midnight, I couldn't keep my eyes open anymore. I fell asleep on a small couch. A blanket was draped over me, and I woke up to see Devon standing beside me, bathed in warm, yellow light. His sharp features looked softer in the light. "It's a wedding gift for you," he said. I didn't respond right away. My past experiences told me that both Brown brothers were unpredictable. When you couldn't understand someone's intentions, staying silent was the best way to protect yourself. Devon crouched down, looking me in the eyes. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice calm. The light was gentle, the atmosphere peaceful. I gathered my courage and asked, "I want the entire Green Corporation." Devon didn't flinch or get angry. I had braced myself for a storm, but it didn't come. Instead, I saw a hint of understanding in his eyes. He nodded calmly. "Give me 3 days," he said. I felt tears well up. My whole life, my requests had never been fulfilled. My parents always gave everything to Amelia. But now, after everything with Jared, I felt thankful for every moment that I wasn't being hurt. Finally, there was someone who didn't refuse me, didn't yell at me, but accepted me quietly. I couldn't hold back my emotions anymore. I buried my head in my knees, curling up like a kitten to hide my tears. Just when everything was feeling perfect, the door suddenly slammed open. It was Jared. I shivered instinctively and looked to Devon for help. Devon stepped close to me, gently walked around me, and whispered in my ear, "Don't be afraid." He took my hand and opened the door. Jared stood there, smelling of wine, his hair messy and his eyes red. He stared at our hands, locked together, his face serious. I wanted to shrink away, but Devon held my hand firmly. Jared looked at me for a long moment with those red eyes, and then he spoke. "Devon gave up the inheritance. Can you give me back my ID?" I was shocked. Memories came rushing back, and fear flooded over me like a wave. In my past life, Jared was a spoiled, rich guy who suddenly decided to get involved with BR Corporation. From that day on, he started beating me. He hit me whenever he felt like it when he got a new project, or if he was in a bad mood. He always targeted the places my clothes couldn't cover, leaving bruises all over my body. I couldn't understand how he became like this. I remembered when we were kids, he had saved me from falling into a frozen lake, holding me until the ambulance came, and telling me not to be scared. Back then, he promised me he would grow up to be strong and protect me, so no one could bully me. But now, he was the one bullying me. Devon's calm voice brought me back to the present. Haiti is a person, not an object. I won't let her be passed from hand to hand. She will always be your sister-in-law. It was like Devon's strength flowed through our hands into me, giving me the courage to face Jared. I finally looked at him and said, even if there were 100 more chances, I would still choose Devon. Devon acted fast. 3 days later, the official Green Corporation account posted a statement saying that President Robert Greene had decided to retire early, and all assets would be handed over to their youngest daughter, Heidi Greene. Mom and Dad went into hiding in the old Greene family home, refusing to talk to anyone. Even though Amelia cried and caused a scene, they didn't come out to explain anything. The next day, all the paperwork was ready, and I officially took control of the Green Corporation. Everything happened so fast, like it was all a dream. With Devon's support, I worked hard to forget that I had once been the abandoned youngest daughter of the Greene family. I threw myself into the work at the company, meeting with partners and solving problems. I was so busy that I didn't even notice that I hadn't seen Jared or Amelia around much lately. Soon, it was Madame Brown's 90th birthday. I remembered that day well because, in my past life, it was the day Jared announced he would get involved in Brown Corporation, starting my nightmare. But in this new life, I was on a different path. Everything would be different this time. The Brown family was putting a lot of focus on Madame Brown's birthday celebration. I cleared my afternoon to pick out a gift for her and went back to the old mansion with Devon. As we pulled into the garage, I saw Jared's car arrive at the same time. He ignored Amelia, who was following him, and blocked our path. Devon, Heidi, my brother and sister-in-law spend a lot of time together, Jared said as he stood next to Devon. I felt completely safe standing beside Devon. As always, Devon stayed calm and nodded to Jared, taking my hand and leading me down the hallway. Jared called after us, "Devon, Heidi, I have a surprise for you tonight for Grandma's birthday." As the banquet neared its end and everyone was enjoying themselves, Jared suddenly stood up and announced loudly, "Ladies and gentlemen, I have something to say." Everyone in the room turned to look at Jared as he stood up with a confident smile. "I believe my brother's disgraceful past makes him unfit to lead the Brown Corporation," he announced. "I request that grandfather and father reconsider who should succeed the Brown family business." Then, Jared played a video from his phone on the big screen. The video showed a much younger Devon in a foreign country, captured with a shaky camera, clearly filmed in secret. I had never seen this side of Devon before. In the video, he was digging through dumpsters for food, running away in panic, sleeping under a bridge, and getting into bloody fights. When the video ended, the room fell into complete silence. It felt like a punch to my heart. Devon had always seemed almost perfect to me, and I had never known about the hardships he'd gone through. I turned to look at him and saw him sitting silently, twirling the beads of his rosary. His face was almost expressionless. Jared stood on a chair, pointing at the screen and speaking with excitement. How can such a disgraceful person with such a shameful past be allowed to lead the Brown Corporation? It would be a joke. My father-in-law, Chairman Brown, stood up in anger and kicked Jared out of the chair. "Ungrateful son," he shouted. But Jared didn't back down. He stared fearlessly at Chairman Brown and said, "I want to join the board of directors. If you finally decide to let Devon take over, I'll expose all of your dark history. The fish either die or the net breaks." Chairman Brown's face turned red with rage, and he gasped for air, pointing at Jared but unable to speak. The situation seemed so strange to me. Jared, always known as a troublemaker in Playboy, was now suddenly so desperate for power. What had changed? Everyone in the room watched Devon closely, waiting to see how he would react. He stood up calmly, a small smile on his face. "It's good that Jared wants to improve," he said. "I'll have this discussed tomorrow." Devon said no more, and we quietly left the room. As we reached the corner, Jared called out to us. I stopped and turned around, with Devin standing beside me, gently holding my hand. Jared walked over, still agitated from the earlier confrontation. "Haiti, can you give me some time? I'll prove that I'm not worse than Devin." I felt Devin's hand give mine a soft squeeze, a pressure so light it was almost unnoticeable. I looked at Jared and replied calmly, "Mr. Jared, I'm your sister-in-law. Whether you're successful or not, it has nothing to do with me." I took Devin's hand and walked up the stairs, hearing Amelia downstairs shouting at Jared, asking him what he meant. Then there was a loud thud, followed by silence. Devin looked at me with a smile in his eyes, and I leaned down to hug him tightly. For a moment, he seemed surprised, but then he hugged me back. "What's wrong?" he asked gently. The scenes from the video kept replaying in my mind. What had Devin been through in his past life? I buried my head in his chest and asked, my voice muffled, "Why didn't you tell me?" Devin seemed to understand right away. He gently patted my back and said, "Jared and I are half-brothers. After my mother passed away, I was sent overseas with nothing. It wasn't until I built myself up in the international financial world that the Brown family brought me back." I looked up at him, serious. "Did you worry about me?" he asked. I nodded, feeling the weight of my words. I had seen the hopelessness in Devin's eyes in my past life, but I also saw the light in them now. I didn't want him to go down the same path as Jared. Jared was already starting to act out again. He was like a time bomb, just waiting to explode. For the first time, I wanted to be brave, not just for myself, but for Devin too. I wanted to protect him from the damage Jared could cause. "I want to train at Brown Corporation for a while," I said, looking at Devin. "Of course," he replied, nodding. Jared, eager to prove himself, started giving it his all at the company. He was the first to arrive each day and the last to leave. The other famous playboys in the capital were shocked to see him take things so seriously. He studied business and technology with dedication, and Devin supported him fully. Jared began to grow quickly, and before long, the board of directors started to take notice. Devin was appointed vice president of Brown Corporation during a time when Amelia was in a surprisingly good mood. All the women who once looked down on her were now fighting to gain her favor. The young master and young madam of the Brown family were getting all the attention. Meanwhile, the once prominent eldest son of the Brown family, Jared, was gradually fading into the background. It seemed like Devin was being sidelined, and important decisions at Brown Corporation were now being made as long as Jared agreed. I, too, became less involved, spending my days just sorting through reports and materials from different departments, barely making any real decisions. One evening, I ended up leaving work late due to a small delay, and I ran into Amelia in the parking lot. She had come to pick up Jared. "Oh, isn't this my dear sister?" Amelia's loud voice echoed as I stopped and stared at her in silence. "Do you remember what I told you? I said Jared would be the future leader of the Brown family. Do you regret not taking that pill?" I studied her closely. It was summer, and she wore long robes that covered her, but I could still make out the bruises on her neck. I smiled and asked her, "So, my dear sister, can you still endure the torment that I went through in my past life?" Amelia's face turned pale, and she took a shaky step back, looking as if she had seen a ghost. You, she stammered, her fear clear. I approached her and whispered in her ear, "Does the pain on your face hurt as much as the fear I once felt?" Fear radiated from every part of her body. She quickly turned and ran, only to crash into someone's arms. Before she could recover, Jared flicked her aside like she was nothing. "I told you not to touch me," he said, ignoring her fear. Amelia scrambled to her feet and clung to Jared's side. "Jared, let's go," she pleaded. But Jared, growing impatient, pushed her away. "Get lost," he snapped. I took a few steps back, staying out of the way of the tension. Jared quickly walked toward me and said, "Haiti, don't be afraid." I smiled, replying, "Mr. Jared, am I not the one doing the attacking? Why would I be scared? I used to be scared when I was the one on the receiving end of your blows." Jared froze, staring at me in disbelief. His hand moved up and down as if he was trying to make sense of what I just said. "Haiti, is it really you?" he asked. I smiled and replied, "Of course, Mr. Jared, it's me." With that, I turned around and left. That night, Amelia went out to socialize and returned around midnight. Shortly after, her screams echoed through the old mansion, pleading for mercy. The sounds grew weaker, but no one came to check on her. The next day, I ran into Amelia as she was walking out. I smiled and asked, "Did you have fun with Mr. Jared last night?" Amelia was dressed head to toe in long sleeves and pants, covering her body completely. She ignored me and quickly followed Jared. I knew exactly where she was going. She was accompanying Jared to the awards ceremony for the 10 most outstanding young entrepreneurs in the country. Jared had become a well-known figure in the business world, and half of the capital knew that the Brown family was now under his leadership. I was in Devin's office, watching the live broadcast with him. He used to hold my hand while we watched, and though he didn't say much, I found it comforting. On the screen, Jared stood confidently at the podium, giving his acceptance speech. All the cameras were focused on him, and his brilliant speech earned him applause. After he finished, he looked into the camera with his red eyes and said, "Did you see that? I can be excellent too. You will return." The public was in an uproar, and all eyes turned to Amelia. She looked terrible, her head hanging low as she stood at the stairs, waiting for Jared to come down. As Jared walked off the stage, a group of IRS agents came up to him. "Mr. Brown, we've received reports that some companies under Brown Corporation are involved in tax evasion. Please come with us for the investigation." The crowd went crazy. On live TV, Jared and Amelia were taken away. I froze, then turned off the TV and walked over to Devin. "Consider this my wedding gift to you," I said. Devin had known for a while that there were financial problems with the companies, but it was hard to investigate them. I, the wife of the seemingly unimportant CEO, became the perfect person to help. I wandered around the company without looking suspicious. After talking to people for a while, the surveillance on me disappeared. Everyone thought I was just a clueless housewife, but what they didn't know was that I had a master's degree in accounting from my previous life. A few days later, the IRS took Jared back to the Brown Corporation to collect evidence. Devin personally greeted them in the conference room. When they saw the pile of documents all signed by Devin, Jared sighed. Devin asked the IRS to give them 30 minutes alone. Once they left, he led Jared into a meeting room. That's when Jared finally realized something. "It's you, Devin. You planned this, didn't you? You put me in a high position at Brown Corporation on purpose. You stayed quiet, let everything happen, all so you could leave a trail. It was you." Devin stayed calm and nodded. "Yes, it was me." Suddenly, Jared tried to attack Devin. I rushed over and shielded him, hugging Devin tightly. Devin quickly turned and protected me behind him. Jared's eyes lost all their fire. He stared at me blankly, muttering, "You were supposed to be mine. You were supposed to be mine." I let go of Devin and sat across from Jared. I placed a document in front of him. Jared Brown, the one who reported it all, was me. His hands shook as he looked at the papers, page by page. Each report had my signature. Then, Jared started crying. "Why? Why? I wasn't good enough to you. I saw how Amelia hurt you, how she pushed you toward the ocean. It broke my heart. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for how I treated you." Just then, Amelia barged in. "Jared, give me 5 million, and I'll agree to a divorce." Jared's face lit up when he saw her. He lunged at her, grabbing her and ripping off her clothes. But then he stopped, horrified. Amelia's body was covered in scars, both new and old. Some wounds were still oozing, and it was clear she had been badly hurt. The scars looked like the ones I had from my past life. I felt a wave of anger, but I also understood. "Do you see the pain he caused you?" I asked. I gave it back to him 10 times over, but then I shook my head. "Jared, you were the one who made me suffer. If I hadn't been trying to escape from you, I wouldn't have gone to the beach to find Amelia. If I hadn't gone to find her, she wouldn't have killed me. You're the reason all of this happened." They took Amelia away that day. After that, she never returned to the Brown family home, disappearing completely. Devin didn't ask me about the meeting room or what had happened. For a while, things were calm, and I felt strangely at ease. But then, one afternoon, I woke up from a nap, suddenly feeling nervous. I realized that time was running out. I didn't have much time to explain, so I texted Devin an address and told him to meet me there. As I drove there, I knew something was about to change. I was kneeling in front of an older man, moving slowly as he panted. She looked up at him and said, "Sir, I have the Brown Corporation's trade secrets. If you're willing to take control of my future, I'll give you everything. Otherwise, give me 50 million and we can make a one-time deal." As she spoke, she kept moving, and then there was a sudden flash from the door. I sighed in relief we had made it just in time. In my past life, after Devin became a monk, Jared kicked Amelia out of the family. My parents refused to help her, and Amelia survived by selling the Brown family's trade secrets. During that time, the family's most important technologies were exposed, causing us to lose key projects. My grandmother was furious and eventually passed away because of the stress. This time, though, I was able to stop it before it happened. On the drive home, I felt an overwhelming tiredness. It was like the events of my past life were still affecting me in this one. I asked myself, do I feel angry about this? No. It wasn't anger I felt, it was something else, but I couldn't explain it. The car rocked gently as I leaned on Devin's shoulder and fell asleep. In my dream, I suddenly felt like I was Jared Brown. I saw scenes from my past life, and everything was so clear. The Green family had sent Heidi to my bed, but I had seen all sorts of women before, so she didn't seem special. She was more shy than any woman I had ever met, curled up in bed like a scared kitten. I didn't feel bad for her. At the time, I was just a rich guy with no real goals. I knew I could never compete with my older brother, so I gave up. Then one day, I found out that Heidi was the little girl my brother had saved from the lake years ago. My brother had been searching for her for so long. I felt a sudden competition with my brother, and I started to hurt her, picking places where her clothes couldn't cover. Every time I hurt her, I knew it was hurting my brother. He became quieter, more distracted at work, and when he came home, he kept his distance from Heidi. It made me feel like I was winning. I discovered that Heidi had been trying to find the person who saved her. She believed it was me, even though I had hurt her. No matter how much I hurt her, she would stay by my side, taking care of me when I came home drunk, preparing my clothes, and remembering the things I liked. As the competition with my brother grew, I became more and more violent with Heidi, hitting her until sometimes she couldn't even get out of bed. My brother grew more distant, and visits to the family home became painful for him. But everyone knew that Heidi loved me and would never leave me, not even if she died. I felt like I was on the edge of winning just one more push, and my brother would break. One night, after a social event, I came home drunk and was about to hit Heidi again. But my brother stopped me. He told me he would give me the Brown family business if I promised to stop hurting Heidi and give her the life she deserved as a Brown family wife. I grinned and shamelessly asked if he had fallen in love with his sister-in-law. If that was the case, I would let him keep her. My brother hit me, and the next day he became a monk. The Brown family business was mine, but I knew my brother had gone crazy, and I was scared of him. I kept my promise to Haiti. I gave her a life of luxury, a life she had never imagined. No longer did I live in fear of losing her, and over time, she began to blossom into the woman she had always been capable of becoming. She grew more beautiful with each passing day, both inside and out. But with all this change, something else shifted. She stopped waiting for me when I came home late at night. She no longer made me tea to help me recover from my hangovers. And she didn't ask me what I wanted to wear to work the next day. It felt like she was slowly moving farther away from me, slipping through my fingers like sand. Then one day, the family driver called to let me know that she had left the house on her own. I don't know why, but for some reason, my heart skipped a beat. I felt a sudden, deep sense of panic. I ordered everyone to look for her immediately. Half an hour later, we checked the surveillance footage and saw that she had gone to the beach. My heart raced and a wave of anxiety gripped me. I didn't want to wait any longer. I quickly grabbed my car keys and sped off to find her. But when I arrived at the beach, I was too late. The sight of Amelia, lying lifeless and covered in blood, was a blow that sent me to my knees. I saw her and Jared there, holding each other. They had both jumped into the sea together. My breath caught in my throat, and I felt a sickening wave of despair wash over me. I had finally lost her. The next thing I remember was waking up, my face soaked with tears. I was resting on Devin's shoulder, and he was looking at me, his face filled with concern. "Did you have a nightmare?" he asked softly, his voice laced with worry. I nodded, feeling the weight of the dream still pressing on me. I asked him to take me to his office, and when we arrived, I found the little dress I had worn all those years ago, tucked away in his filing cabinet. A sob escaped me as I realized how much of my past Devin had known. I cried and laughed at the same time, overwhelmed by the emotion. "Did you know all along?" I asked him, my voice shaking. "Did you know it was me?" Devin held me close, his arms wrapping around me tenderly. "I always knew, ID," he said softly. "I've always known. I've been waiting for you to grow up, waiting for you to make your decision. And now, I'm so glad that you've finally chosen me." That night, I stood outside his house, just as I had all those years ago, filled with so many conflicting emotions. I was ready to turn away, but then I saw Amelia Green. She was getting into a car, and in that moment, I realized something I hadn't been willing to see before. I had to let go of the past. I had to move on. I finally left. I cried. I cried hard, and Devin held me tightly. I opened my arms and wrapped them around him, as though I were hugging my shy, insecure self. In his arms, I found the comfort I had been seeking for so long. I understood now that when you love someone truly, deeply, it's not just a feeling, it becomes a part of who you are, flesh and blood. "I'm so glad you found me, Devin," I whisper through my tears. "Thank you for taking my hand and guiding me through all the storms in my life." At some point, I had felt resentful of the challenges and hardships that had been thrust upon me by fate. But now, as I stood there in his arms, I finally understood. The sun had come out, the clouds had cleared, and the flowers were blooming once again. The hard times had passed, and now everything was finally falling into place. I had found my place in the world, and I had found Devin someone who had always known me, always believed in me, and had waited patiently for me to understand that I was worthy of love. My heart swelled with gratitude. The storm was over, and the calm had arrived.